Hello and welcome to a special bonus episode of Postcards from a Dying World. Today, I'm doing just a short video with 6 reasons why you should be reading F. Paul Wilson. Now, F. Paul Wilson is an active and longtime genre writer. But as far as what genre he writes in, horror, science fiction, mystery, yes. Medical thrillers, yes, he's written a lot. Now, one of the reasons why I was prompted to do this is Paul recently suffered from a stroke and he's recovering from it. This is my attempt to send out some healing vibes to Dr. Paul Wilson because we want him back writing again soon. But in the meantime, I want to tell you, if you're not familiar with F. Paul Wilson's work, why you should be reading his work. So I've got 6 reasons, starting with number 1. He's the author of the most elaborate saga ever written, starting with, in the early 80s, a little novel called The Keep, and most recently with a novella called Signals, which was only like 2 years ago. He's been doing stories in what he calls the secret history of the world. And if you look in the back of Signals, there's a timeline right here in all of the secret history books that show all the stories that encompass the secret history of the world, which is an ongoing sci-fi, horror, fantasy kind of epic battle of good and evil that takes place over 2 different book series, 3 trilogies, and a total of 35 books and 3 novellas. Okay, now that may sound really daunting to start off reading, but they're awesome. They're really, really good. Now, when I say that it's the most elaborate of sagas, keep in mind that when I said there's 2 different series, there's the series called the Adversary Cycle, which is 6 books. And there's the Repairman Jack series, which is like 15 or 16 books, somewhere around there. And then there's all these various trilogies that feed into it, including Young Repairman Jack and Repairman Jack the Early Years, and because Repairman Jack is the title character of the 2nd series. Now, here's the thing. Repairman Jack, book number 1, The Tomb, right here, and this is the original 80s paperback, is also book 3 of the Adversary Cycle, the other series. Book 15 of Repairman Jack is Night World, and Night World is also book 6 of the Adversary Cycle. So you could read the Adversary Cycle on its own, which existed before the Repairman Jack books. Well, like I said, book 3 existed. So book 3 and book 6 of Adversary existed, and he spun off into a whole nother series about the main character of book 3 of the Adversary Cycle. That would be Repairman Jack, and did a series of Repairman Jack books, including the early years, the teen years, which is the YA Repairman Jack books. It's really an intense and elaborate story, but it all coincides. So imagine like 2 train tracks coming together. So you have 2 stories that meet in book 15 of Repairman Jack, book 6 of Adversary Cycle. It's an amazing feat of plotting. And so to keep that all together is really, really intense. And we're going to talk about Repairman Jack in one of these other points. But number 1, it's the most elaborate saga ever. And it's completely awesome. Repairman Jack is a totally great character, and we'll come back to him in reason number 5. But next is reason number 2. For reason number 2 that you should be reading F. Paul Wilson, I'm going to talk about one book in particular, and that's the very first book of the Adversary Cycle. This is the book that kicks off the whole shebang, and that is The Keep, which is a horror novel set in World War II, which is something, of course, there are Easter eggs from this book and my upcoming novel, The Last Night to Kill Nazis. And by the way, F. Paul Wilson was the number 1 influence on The Last Night to Kill Nazis, like for real, for many, many reasons. But The Keep is a novel that was turned into a horror movie in the 80s by director Michael Mann, the guy who made Collateral and Heat, and a lot of great movies. The Keep is not one of his great movies. It's a terrible adaptation. I don't recommend you watch it. But what I do recommend you do is read The Keep, because if you don't read any others, it stands alone. It stands alone. It stands just fine alone. And I consider The Keep one of the top 10 horror novels ever written. And remember, he didn't have he didn't have 35 books or 34 follow-up books planned when he wrote The Keep. He just intended it to be one story, and then things happened. A writing career happened. But The Keep is a fantastic horror novel on its own. It's dark, it's gothic, it's scary. It has we'll come back and talk about it in reason number 4 too, a little bit. For one of the things that's great about it is one of Paul's number one tricks. But the thing about this book is that you could easily go into the first third and think this is a vampire novel, and it's so much more. The Keep is seriously a modern classic of horror. By modern, I mean it was from the 80s, but I consider it modern considering that horror goes back to Frankenstein. Anyways, The Keep is a masterwork, and it is one that hopefully one day we'll get like a good adaptation of, because the movie that we got is just it's not awesome. But yeah, so although Paul famously did commentary for the movie at the Lovecraft Fest in Portland, I believe, and I wish I had seen that, because that would have been pretty awesome. Reason number 3 that you should read F. Paul Wilson is also a standalone. Well, it's not a standalone novel, but it's one novel in particular, and that's book 10. It's either book 10 or 11 of the Repairman Jack series, and that's this book, Harbingers. Harbingers has one of the all-time greatest twists on a hero's journey that I've ever seen in fiction, bar none. Period, stop, end. It is one of the best twists that I've ever read, and it's one that you have to read all 11 books leading up to it to fully get. And I'm not going to spoil it, but I will say a few things that will kind of hint to what's going on, and without giving it away. But the thing about this twist is that it is one that Paul was building in books 5, 6, 7, all the way up to this one. And at the end, I'll do a spoiler. I'll do a spoiler warning, and I'll talk about it a little bit more. But this twist is so good. It literally caused me to drop my jaw when I was reading it. I couldn't believe that it was happening in the book, and it was so well done. And that's Harbingers, the best twist on the hero's journey that I've ever read in fiction, and it requires the last couple books before it to set it up. So you got to read the whole saga if you want to see what I'm talking about without spoilers. I'll talk about it at the end of the video if you don't care about spoilers. But yeah, so number 3, the best twist on the hero's journey. So number 4, I'm going to have to spoil these books a little bit to do this, so you can skip ahead if you want to. But my thing is, a lot of times if I hear a good reason to read a book and I come back to the book later, I often forget why somebody told me these books were so good. So I think we're okay. But for number 4, why you should read F. Paul Wilson is that he's the master of sleight of hand plotting. So what do I mean by sleight of hand plotting? Well, first of all, I want to say a little something about F. Paul Wilson and plotting in general. He's one of the best, and I consider him my plotting Yoda. I did a whole interview on this podcast with F. Paul Wilson several years ago that was never meant to be public. It was just us talking about plotting that I was using for background for a class. So if you want to listen to that, that's great. I also took a plotting class from Paul at the Borderlands boot camp in Baltimore, Maryland, and I think he's the best. But what I mean by sleight of hand is, for example, The Keep. For the first 2/3 of the book, you would clearly think it's a vampire novel. It's not. It's something else. It's a deeper, darker forces at work i.e. The Adversary, which we'll eventually, follow through 6 books through 35 books. And then the second Repairman Jack book is a good example, which is Legacies, which looks like a haunted house novel in the beginning, but it's not. It's about technology and trickery. He did the trickery with the haunted house in the haunted air, which is more, this Repairman Jack is more of a haunted house novel, but Paul loves to make you think it's one thing and then it's another. And some of the Repairman Jack books are more straightforward, what they are, but for the most part, a lot of Paul's best books are the ones where he tricks you and makes you think he's doing something else with the plot, but it's going elsewhere. Now, when I talk about his plotting, one thing you should know about all of Paul's books is that he does them in real time. Basically, like each book is by day. He does Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and he tries to do it as without BS as possible. And that's part of his plotting. But at the same time, what I'm really talking about here is how he tricks you into thinking the books are about one thing, and then often they're about others. So number five reason you should be reading F. Paul Wilson is Repairman Jack is the greatest series character ever. So there's a way you could pitch Repairman Jack as a TV series and call it The Equalizer with the supernatural, right? Because Repairman Jack is a guy who lives off the grid. He's kind of an anarchist libertarian type guy who doesn't believe in the system. And he basically helps people and he gets revenge for people. So it's a lot like The Equalizer in the setup. But the thing is, he always finds monsters and supernatural stories. And then much like the X-Files, where you have, Monster of the Week stories in some of the books, some of them are a part of the Adversary cycle and Saga with the whole Adversary storyline. So you can kind of get a little bit of both. Now, one of the reasons why he's the greatest ever series character is because F. Paul Wilson built his whole career around Repairman Jack. And what he was able to do was to, if he wanted to do a samurai book, he did By the Sword. If he wanted to do a book about 9/11 and conspiracy theory, he does Ground Zero. If he wants to do a book about technology, he does Fatal Error. And he wants to do the haunted house, he does the haunted air. So he was able to do every genre that he wanted to do. There's a medical thriller one, which is great because he's a doctor. And between all the Repairman Jack books, he gets to do any kind of genre that he wants. And it's just a really cool way to make all that happen. So the sixth and final reason why you should read F. Paul Wilson is that he has a breezy, easy to read style. Now, I know if I tell you there's 35 books in a series or 35 books in a saga, that is very daunting to read. I read the majority of The Secret History of the World during 2012, and I got through it all in a year, and that tells you something. The reason why is because Paul's style, he's not verbose with language. He doesn't waste time. He is, and I really appreciate this as a writer. It's something that I've taken to heart. There's two writers who I think are really, really good at writing propulsive thrillers, David Morrell and F. Paul Wilson, that what they both have share in common is they don't mess around. If there's something that's not needed for the story, it's not going to be there. And so these books read fast. And they're fun, and you'll fall in love with the characters. Jack's extended family is, of characters are just really delightful characters. And Paul did a really awesome job. Now, do I think you need to read all the ancillary stuff, like the Repairman Jack teen books? The teen books kind of feed into, especially Ground Zero, it feeds into it, but it's not really that super necessary. I think the early years books are really good. But there's no supernatural, for example, in it because Jack hasn't been introduced to those things. Now, the ancillary trilogies, like the Ice trilogy, I really don't think you have to read those to enjoy these books, but I think the Adversary Cycle, the 6 books of the Adversary Cycle, and the 15 books of Repairman Jack are pretty essential. And you'll see why fans just kept wanting him to write more and more Repairman Jack, even though it had a closed loop and it ended at Night World, a book that he wrote in the 80s before he even started the series. People wanted more Repairman Jack. These were bestsellers. So, really owe a lot to editor David Hartwell, the famous science fiction editor who we lost a few years ago, who was a champion of these books from what I hear. But yeah, so the breezy style, like these don't take long to read. They're fun. And you should be reading them for that reason. Now, let's get into spoilers. So if you don't want to know why the Harbinger's twist is so good, if you want to find out for yourself, stop here and go read F. Paul Wilson. And you can find all of his work at repairmanjack.com. And you can find out more about everything. I should have said that at the beginning, right? Repairmanjack.com. So stick around if you want the spoiler. Okay, you're still here. You want to hear about the spoiler for Harbingers. Now, I really, one last time, think that you should read the whole series if you want to find out why. So starting with the Keep, the Adversary Cycle, the adversary in the book, and I just read Divine Invasion by Philip K. Dick, and the adversary by that name is in that book as well. The adversary is the ultimate evil, and what is setting up as the kind of mythology story of the Repairman Jack books is that there are these forces of good and evil, working to stop the adversary. And throughout the first 10 books, the people fighting on the side of good have been trying to recruit Jack, and Jack is kind of slowly discovering that there are this basic underground, basically, of people who are working to try and fight the adversary. But there are also soldiers who are working for evil. And so there, throughout the first 10 books, there's all kinds of confrontations between the sides of good, bad, whatever. And Jack keeps getting these cryptic messages that say a tree should not have branches, or a tree shed of branches, or something like that. It's been a little while since I've read it, but so he keeps getting these warnings, but he doesn't know what it means. And what he finds out in Harbingers is, because, and again, this is spoilers, but in like book 5, his father is killed. In book 7, or somewhere around the way, his sister is killed, and his best friend is killed, and all these people that he cares about are killed. And he, as a reader, you just believe, and as Jack does, that this is the forces of the adversary. But the twist in Harbingers is that it was the side recruiting him to fight the adversary the whole time that was killing his loved ones because they did not want him to have distractions or liabilities. It's kind of like the whole Jedi thing, but like on, just really intense. Like, no loved ones or no branches on the tree that can, the spear should have no branches. I think that's the phrase, now that I'm thinking about it. A spear should have no branches. So and that big twist is, and it's really a jaw-dropping twist, because in a hero's journey, you're setting up the sides of good and evil, and here's your ultimate hero for good in the story, and he can't trust the people on the side of good because they've been killing his family the whole time. And to me, that's a fantastic twist, and it's one I didn't see coming. And when I read it, my jaw was literally on the floor. So yeah, that's your spoiler take. So if you made it this far, and again, repairmanjack.com, and Dr. Wilson, if you're watching, I just want to say thank you for all the books, all these years, the mentorship. has been great. And I really appreciate all the help that you've done for younger writers, because that's like a huge thing. And we hope to see you back writing soon. And we need more F. Paul Wilson for sure. And everybody else who's watching this, please buy F. Paul Wilson books. Make sure that he never falls out of print, any of that stuff. And I know he should be feeling good. His Jets got Aaron Rodgers, right? So he should be feeling pretty good about that. So thank you, Dr. Wilson. And we'll see all you folks soon again on Postcards from a Dying World. I'm going to be doing a bonus episode soon on the works of John Shirley. So come back for that one.